Welcome to Multi-Studio Mastery, a show where we nerd out on studio growth, leadership, and operational excellence in boutique fitness. I'm your host, Tessa Thomas, co-founder of Pipeline Solutions. We work behind the scenes with studio owners and operators to streamline back-end chaos, improve retention, and scale sustainably. On this podcast, I sit down with industry leaders, multi-studio owners, and operators in the thick of it, so we can unpack what's really working and what's just noise. If you're building a stronger, smarter studio, you're in the right place. Hey everyone, Tessa here from Multi-Studio Mastery. Welcome to another episode. I'm super excited today to be joined by Ben Ludwig. Ben is a servant leader seeking to create great culture and profitable fitness and wellness businesses across the globe. Having trained teams around the world, Ben is noted for his ability to galvanize leaders into action and grow brands through strong ethics, purpose, and fun. He is widely published across the fitness industry and was recently an Amazon best-selling collaborative author of Real Talk with Real Business Pros. So excited to have you here, Ben. Welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, super excited to be here, Tessa. Thank you for having me.
Of course. I'd love to kind of just start with a little bit of background from you, your journey, how you kind of got started in fitness. We'll get to, kind of where you are now, but what brought you into this world?
Yeah, absolutely. What got me into this world, Tessa, I think is I've always had a desire to help other people. And so from a very young age, actually in college, I wanted to be able to help people achieve their goals in the gym. And, I realized if I got certified, I could, get people to pay me to do that. So I got certified very early on. And, through a quick progression, just, fast forward over the years, I realized the more influence that I was able to have in higher level positions, I was able to affect more change. I was able to change more lives. And so that was really why I, quote unquote, climbed to the ladder, is because I wanted to be able to help more people. And so, yeah, I ended up getting some very great opportunities very early on in my career. My first regional director position was at the ripe age of 22. No clue what to do it. Knew we needed to sell stuff and change more lives. And I was just hiring people with high energy, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, over the years, I've experienced a lot, mostly sink or swim style jobs, where they've been either startup style or turnaround style or heavy growth. And so because of that, a lot of the jobs that I've had have been more so just toss you in and go get them, figure it out. And so through that, I've learned a lot of lessons and made a lot of mistakes and learned a lot about myself and how to be a better leader. And so through that has been what has gotten me into what I do today, which is a lot of consulting and working with partnering brands and developing standard operating procedures for brands and things like that. So that's a lot of what I do today.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think, a lot of people get into the fitness world, I think, in a similar way of wanting to help people. I don't think you really land in this industry if that's not kind of core to your person. So not terribly surprised by that. And I've come across quite a few younger regional managers still in this day. I feel like the fresh out of college or university kind of energy and go-getter kind of style is still desirable in the industry today, and kind of giving those people the chance and a little bit of extra responsibility right out of the gates. You mentioned that now you do quite a bit of consulting in the space, and of course you've seen all sorts of things which we can get into as well. But I'd love to know where you see, or kind of what key challenges you see in terms of scaling a boutique fitness concept in today's market, versus maybe 10 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in the fitness industry more so in the hustle days, where we were opening gyms, and opening gyms meant, printing off 30,000 flyers and getting them all over the city and making a million phone calls and following up with leads every single day. And, we just grew up in a different era of what fitness looked like. And it was more about making sure that every single person in the entire area knew who you were to be able to be successful when it came to scaling. And so over the years, it's been very interesting to see the evolution of what the fitness industry has become. And so, today, most recently, I've worked with some global brands on being able to figure out how to scale well. I was the lead consultant with F45 Training at the time, whenever they were first looking into getting into private equity and had some groups that wanted to scale very quickly. And so I was their consultant. And then I've also consulted some brands that have been looking to expand and even have held some roles within some brands that expanded. Most recently, Traction Group, where we expanded to 12 locations in 18 months, very, very quickly. And so, what does it take to do that? What does that look like? Well, I think probably the three key things that I've noticed in all the years that I've helped my own brands and then brands scale have been number one. I think there's always going to be financial challenges and figuring out profit margins. I think it's very easy to be able to look at a year over year gym and say, okay, here's our March of last year. Now, how do we outperform that by 5% or whatever your goals are? We need to get to 20% profitability. We're at 15. How do we get that extra 5%? It can be very standard, when you're
Right.
looking at a mature gym, but scaling, that's not usually the case. As a matter of fact, nowadays, you got to be first in the market, you got to be best in the market, or you got to be the most competitive price in the market, typically.
Yeah.
So in that regard, how do you do that well? And so, what we have found is you really have to have a very structured plan as to when you're going to be adding positions, how you're going to
Mm.
start disseminating cost of employees, such as sales staff. Maybe you have a salesperson across 4 locations when you get to number 4, as opposed to 4 different salespeople. So
Right.
there's different ways to be able to do that well. And so that's of course number one, is you got to be able to keep up with the money. Number two is, how do you continue to keep staff and member experience the highest of quality at 100 locations versus 2 whenever it's
Yep.
you, right? And so there's got to be operations in place. There's got to be expectations of what the culture is going to be on how you hire staff, how you onboard staff, how you hold staff accountable, which I'm sure we'll get into today. And then the third is, this is a funny one, Tessa, but I have found that making sure you're balancing growing staff while
Hmm.
growing the business simultaneously, because there
Hmm.
can often be a miss there where
Right.
you're not growing as fast as the staff wants, and so you lose staff because they thought they were promised growth in 3 days,
Right.
but in reality it's going to be a year and a half,
Yeah.
or
Right.
whatever the case.
Of course.
Or worse, when the business is growing faster than your staff, and
Yes.
so your people that are with you early on, you want them to step into these roles, but they're not developing fast enough.
Right.
So how
Right.
do you manage that? How do you help not stifle the growth of the business because of your staff, but continue to grow the business without leaving staff behind? What does that look like?
Yeah.
So those are definitely the top three that I've personally dealt with.
I love that you've, kind of boiled it down to those three because each one is, multi-step within itself.
Oh yeah.
Right. So, we could dig into each one there, but what I really love about that is that they're great umbrellas, like they're great buckets,
Yeah.
for essentially, obviously, if you're scaling, yeah, financially things need to be in a certain place. You need to have a legitimate plan for that growth, for those new, potentially markets or a new concept. If you're bringing, multiple concepts into one,
Right.
like ownership group or something like that. Um, and then of course that experience, if that drops off, it's over, right? Like
Exactly.
that's, without that you can't even look at those next 2, 3, 5, 10 locations if we can't kind of scale that experience even from 1 to 2, which is
Yep.
can be surprisingly difficult
True.
sometimes. I'd love to, on that note, dig into that team and experience side, because to me, everything to me always comes back to that. I
Yep.
think that is the main driver of growth across the biggest brands in the world, and even, of course, even the single location, right? If that experience on the floor and what people feel in the space isn't top tier, and these days with how competitive things are, if it's really not world class, it's really easy to lose people. So
Yep.
I'd love to get your thoughts on how do you build that strong team? How do you keep a strong team? So I guess it's two parts, almost like how do you build a strong team, and then how do you keep a strong team, which I think is sometimes even harder once things get off the ground.
I think you're so right, Tessa. I personally have always been a huge believer in culture, and culture is not just what you put in your core values on a sheet of paper whenever you hand someone a handbook.
Yep.
It's how you act every day. It's how you communicate. It's how you establish expectations for your people. Culture is also winning and losing. It's not just whether everybody likes each other. And so I totally agree with you. I think all three of these items that we've mentioned, as far as the biggest challenges, can be very heavily tied into your staff or your culture. And so, what we have done and what I've always encouraged when I'm consulting groups, Tessa, is number one, you've got to have a very clear set of core values as to what you believe. And that's how you interview, that's how you hire, and that's how you fire. I mean, I know that's a generalization,
Yeah.
but if that's where you start, it makes everything a million times easier because you're hiring and firing based off of what you believe. And so once you establish those core values, the other cool part of that, Tessa, is, I can go back to Traction Group, for example. We had less than a 10% staff turnover year over year.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Yep.
was very proud of that because the industry standard is literally the opposite, right?
Everybody. Yeah. You lose everyone
Exactly.
in a year.
I
Yeah.
mean, goodness
Yeah.
gracious. There's just a pandemic of turnover in the fitness
Yeah.
industry, people just finding the next best thing or trying to do their own thing online or whatever the case. And so what we did is we really leaned into our member base. And so a lot of our coaches and even our managers came from members. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, people that already believed in the culture, people that were already drinking the Kool-Aid, so to speak. Like, oh,
Yeah.
I love this place. This is the best. I want to be here forever. Cool. Let's get you certified and let's get you on the floor,
Yeah.
right?
Let's make that
So
dream come true. Yeah.
exactly, exactly. So we were always on the lookout for new staff members just on the workout floor, and that turned out really well for us. A lot of our coaches came from that. Um, Second thing is, how we onboarded people. As I mentioned, we heavily invested in getting people certified and making sure that we invested in them on the front end. And then also their onboarding. We made it very clear what their onboarding was going to look like. And it was interactive. It wasn't just a handbook. The head
Right.
trainer, the manager over each location was going to go through almost an apprenticeship with this person to make sure that they not only knew what it sounded like, but what it looked like, what it felt like, and how to be able to make sure that they were top tier when it came to
Right.
our expectations. That way, if there were any unmet expectations, it wasn't because we didn't tell you.
Yeah.
Which also, to your point, Tessa, bled over into our accountability and our performance management. Is anytime we manage them, the management or reviews or audits were
Mm-hmm.
always based on the expectation that we set from day one. And
Right.
so all of that allowed us to be able to ensure that expectations were always very clear. If you weren't meeting expectations, you knew it. Have you ever been in a position or seen people that are like, "What? What do you mean I'm not meeting expectations?" Like,
Never seen that before ever,
yeah,
but
I know, right?
yeah.
We never wanted that to be the case, and
Yeah.
so that was what we did. Is we had a cycle of expectation, and the head
Right.
trainers, managers of each location was held accountable for reviewing every single staff member. And
Right.
so we made sure of that. And then even the managers, Tessa, one of the things that we also wanted to be able to do was we were very open in our reviews to where it was going to be personal first and
Mm.
then professional second. And what I mean by
Love it.
that is I want to know what your goals are. I want to know what you want to accomplish. I want to know what you want to get better at. I want to know where you see yourself. I want to know what your skill sets are and where you think we could use that long term. And sometimes, here's the hard part, sometimes that's within our business and sometimes that's not. And so we did have to let some staff members go, not necessarily in a negative way, but just in the fact that we didn't have what they wanted
Yeah.
long term. And
Yeah.
so I believe that the opposite of what you may think when it comes to having a conversation about working somewhere else holds true in that your staff believes even more in you when they trust that you want what's best for them outside of only wanting what's best for the business. Not that we neglect the business. Of course,
100%.
I want what's best for the business, which is why I'm talking to you to begin with, because we're
Yeah.
here because we're in business together. But at the end of the day, it's ensuring that we establish steps for them, whether it be here or somewhere else.
100%. Because of course, um, everybody has different skill sets and they have different goals and a different 1 year, 2 year, and 5 year plan or where they see
Yep.
themselves. And the business will only, you know, grow with the people that want to grow with it.
Right.
Right. If that's not the case, there's a ceiling there. It's invisible, but you'll hit it every time. If that's the owner or the head trainer or the manager, that growth can't happen without the growth of those individuals. And of course, best way for that growth to happen is if it's in alignment with what they want, with what you want.
Yeah.
Without that, it's just kind of full of friction. So I love that. And I'd love to ask kind of just a little bit of a practical or granular question on the performance reviews, and that's just around cadence. How frequently was that happening at the trainer or coach level, and then also with your kind of team leaders?
Most of the coaches that we had were part-time, so their reviews were once a month. So every 4 weeks, the manager would go in and audit a couple of their classes, or a class block as we called it. So a few classes, how they introduced themselves to new prospects, how they onboarded new members, how they talked to members after class, some of those sort of things. And then, of course, obviously all the practical things like how they acted during class, the interaction with the members, the progression and regression, those sort of things. So we had a checklist, of course, that we created for that. So the part-time staff would be once a month, and then we had meetings with the managers once a week. So
Okay.
we very much followed the entrepreneurial operating system, or as it's most commonly known, EOS,
Right.
the traction framework. And so that was the meeting style that we followed. Any sort of rocks that we were trying to accomplish, whether it be a revenue goal or a new member goal. And then also, Tessa, one of the things that I was really big on is, man, we had fun with it.
Yeah.
I think of an easy example. Like, one of the rocks that we had was we purchased a location that was underperforming, and we knew we could turn it around. So we had to make quite a few changes. We remodeled the location. We had to promote and demote certain staff members, put a new person in charge that we believed would be the best fit for the manager role. And over the course of about 90 days, we set a goal as to where we wanted to be in member count.
Mm-hmm.
So we had to make some changes with the payment structure and some of those sort of things, but we knew where we wanted to get in total members. And so every week we would have an all staff meeting where we would make the staff announcements, celebrate the wins, talk about some of the things that we noticed that needed to be addressed across the network of locations. And for a few weeks, once that location hit its member goal, that member number was my background, like for our
Oh,
team,
nice.
right? And
Yeah.
so yeah, we
Yeah.
just made it fun, and
Right.
I believe that that's a part of where culture, or fun, can be integrated into KPIs.
Right.
And so yes, of course we wanted to grow the business, and look, we were trying to open up a bunch of locations, and so we had to take loans out on some of the locations that were profitable to be able to open some of the other locations. And I mean, this is serious stuff. I
Yeah.
mean, we're talking about big dollar
Absolutely.
amounts that we got to pay back to these banks and figure out how to make sure that we're profitable. So we didn't take it lightly. So don't get me wrong there.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, we wanted to make sure that the KPIs were fun for the people, because we were investing in the people to make sure that they accomplished the KPIs.
Of
And
course.
so
And you're tying it to a bigger, you're tying it to the bigger business goal, right?
right,
And so,
exactly.
I think oftentimes there can be a disconnect there between the team that's on the
Mhm.
floor or the team that's in studio and those broader business goals. I always encourage even single location operators to be as transparent as they can be, with those goals and with that vision, to just try and tie things together, or else, it can feel a little bit disjointed, and that person might feel like
Yeah.
they're just doing their couple hours in their shift, right? And it's not tied to anything bigger or greater. Everybody wants to contribute to something big. I think anyone that says they don't is lying. So, tying all of that together, I love that, because you're doing that once a week. Everyone knows what the goal is, and where that translates is literally that next person that walks through the door. They're
Mhm.
thinking about that, whether it's like subconscious or just right in that moment of, I want Ben's background to be 255 the next time we open up that call or whatever it is. So I think that's really great, and being able to tie it all together is, I think, really, really important. And that starts with even just the cadence of a weekly meeting, right?
Mhm.
How often are we meeting, bringing the whole team together, either virtually or in person? Most of the time virtually now, but holding that standard is I think a great place to start. If you're listening and thinking, okay, this is what I need to get a better handle on my operations, then go grab the free Studio Operations Toolkit. It's packed with plug and play resources for improving retention, boosting member value, and tightening up your operational backend all in one place. You'll find the link in the show notes, so go ahead and grab it, and let's get back to the episode. Just kind of one more thing on the team side that I'd love to dig into a little bit is just, we touched on it before, but with that personal and professional growth and ongoing education, what are, some things that you've done on that side of things to retain these great people?
Yeah, I think a lot of studio owners and managers that I have met with, Tessa, either they do one of two things. They either try and push everything off and say, well, once we hit our numbers or once we get a certain profitability, then we'll invest in our people. Or, I don't have time to invest. And so I'm just going to pass that off and hope that the assistant manager does it or whatever. There's a disconnect there. The opposite side that I've seen studio owners and managers that value education so heavily that they neglect performance and only value education. And so I'm a firm believer that there's a balance there. And so I think that number one, I have to make sure that my staff knows that I'm willing to invest in them as much as needed. And so I can't tell you, Tessa, whenever I first came on, so talking about Traction Group, for an example, whenever I came on as the chief operating officer, I personally did all of the one-on-ones with every studio manager to start, because I wanted to make sure that they knew their numbers so well that they were presenting to me and not vice versa. We weren't typing mind body and figuring out how many sales we made together today.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Which was the case for some of our managers. So we had to really lean into the education of KPIs. But then also I wanted to let them know that I was willing to invest in them personally as well. So if they were struggling with retention rates, we're going to role play on our next one-on-one. And I'm going to be a client that's about to cancel and you gotta try and save me. Or I didn't come last week, or let's flip flop it. You didn't come for 7 days and I'm calling you to follow up with you and see how I can get you back on the schedule, but make it about your goals. Okay. So I'm calling you. Ready? Here we go. We're role playing. And so I wanted them to know that I was willing to invest in them. Secondarily, though, Tessa, I also believe that, again, those are going to be job specific investments. There's also going to be personal investments or things that your staff wants long term. So another easy example is one of the managers that worked for me within Traction Group really wanted to learn how to be able to run ads. He wanted to get into marketing someday for fitness studios. So I actually personally invested in him and paid for some online courses to allow him to be able to learn more about this idea of what marketing was and some of the basics of what marketing meant and how to be able to run ads and some of those sort of things. And then also had him talk to our agencies and some of those things so he could ask some questions to who we were already working with. And so I saw that as an investment possibly beyond our business. Maybe he'll do it for us one day, maybe he won't. But either way, that's okay. I want him to know that I want him to win in life, not just in his role.
Absolutely. No, I love it. And you don't know where that could go. To your point, it could be someone that then is able to take on more responsibility or take on an expanded role in the business at a later time. It could be something that benefits them in the future. And they always think of you positively, which can lead to, other connections or referrals back to the business. So, investing in people is definitely always worth it. I love to shift gears a little bit and kind of go back to kind of that multi-location growth. Outside of just, of course, the team is the nucleus of all of that. But in terms of challenges, there's kind of these different growth phases. There's pre-sale, maybe that first 6 to 12 months, and then kind of beyond that. And we'd love to understand, your frameworks around those different growth phases and the challenges of essentially opening each new location and how you do that.
I'm a firm believer in what's called freedom within a framework. And so, Tessa, I don't believe that I need to micromanage every single phone call or every single team member that goes out to every single lead. But I do believe that we're going to stick to an overall script based on what I know works.
Right.
I'm a believer that as we scale, we're going to try new things and figure out how to be able to be successful, maybe outside the box, but we also need to pivot fast. And so
Mm.
if something's not working, we got to make a change. If something is working, we need to lean into that. And so
Right.
those were some of the things that we did. And those are some of the things that I've always advised on when it comes to scaling business is when you're going from 2 locations to 4 locations to 8 locations to 15 locations to 25 locations, every iteration is going to look a little bit different.
Hmm.
And so I've used a lot of third-party services and partnerships that worked at one level, but maybe didn't work at another.
Right.
I've,
Yeah.
I've worked with, third-party services that worked for a time and then eventually had to build out internal teams,
Yeah.
and so when it comes to bookkeeping or sales or marketing, those are things that you have to consider as you scale is when does it make sense for us to bring this internal, or when does it make sense for us to maybe look at expanding a partnership or maybe developing a
Hmm.
deeper relationship with a partnership? It's just, those are all questions that you have to ask yourself. I wish there was just here's all the 50 steps you got to take to get to 500 locations. But it's going to
Oh,
look different every time, And so
absolutely.
depending on the demographics of where your locations are, what the lease is like, what the staff is like, how many locations you want, or like, you said earlier, if you want to diversify and have multiple brands, which is what we did with
Hmm.
Traction, there's a lot of different ways to be able to go about that. And so, I think those are, to go back to answer your question, number one, we made a lot of changes really, really fast. We
Right.
put some people in positions that just weren't right, and we had to get them out of those positions really fast. We, established partnerships with other companies that didn't work out for us, that we had
Mm.
to make a move really fast. And so being able to admit this was a mistake, we got to make a change. I
Right.
think that was number one. Number two is we had to choose strategies that were based on data. And so I think I've always been, as you have realized as of late, Tessa, we got a chance to
Hmm.
meet in person out at HFA. I'm a huge networker. I love meeting people. I love getting to know people, and I just ask a million questions. I want to know what everybody's doing, you know.
Yep.
And so we chose strategies to grow based on what other people had done. We very
Right.
humbly just asked for everybody's advice. What did y'all do? How are you doing this? The brand that we started growing was we started with a bunch of F45s. And so we asked a bunch of other F45 owners that had opened successful pre-sales. What did you do? What did you charge? How did you do it? Like we just wanted to be able to gather all the information that we could and then make data-driven decisions. And then third, yeah, which I somewhat mentioned this, and we talked about this earlier, but you got to have the right people in the right seats.
Right.
And so one of the things that we realized very early on, Tessa, is, we were opening locations across the country, and there's just no way for us to be in person at every single
Hmm.
location. And so we ended up raising up some mid-level management based on ownership of the positions that they were in. And so
Right.
telling you, Tessa, when you develop culture the right way, we had some. I can think of one person in particular that we ended up promoting into like a district level manager position. I kid you not, Tessa. The first conversation that I had with this person, she told me, "Hey, just so you know, I don't like sales." That's the first conversation we had.
Right.
And,
Right.
fast forward 2 years, and this girl's like, "We're gonna get to 400 members.
Right.
Let's go."
Turned her into a machine, a
Exactly.
monster,
I mean,
created a
I'm
monster.
telling you, she just
Yeah.
loved, and she just, I mean, she broke so many records and
Right.
other people and was like
Yeah.
holding people accountable like nobody's business. I mean,
Yeah.
but it's because she believed in the mission. She
Right.
believed in our core values, and
Yeah.
she had a great team around her. Every time we hopped on a one-on-one, she would just brag on her team.
I love
And
that.
she's the one that hired them and developed them. So really, it
Right.
was to her credit.
Yeah.
Those are really the big three things, when it comes to what that looks like for sure.
Yeah. 100%. I love that. I think 50 steps to 500 locations is a great ebook.
Yeah,
you're
there you
sitting you're
go.
sitting on a great ebook there, Ben.
There we
But
go. Create some clickbait here on the
yeah,
podcast.
100%. 100%. But to your point, it is complex. And it takes a lot. It takes a ton of forethought and planning and understanding different markets and understanding different concepts and your team and your product or your what you're putting out in the world. And so, with that being said, the strategies for success, in scaling from, one location to 10 plus and everything you've touched on, really comes down to standardizing as many of those pieces, right, as you can. And so for that person that's maybe just thinking about this right now, maybe they're not quite in it yet, they have something, they have a concept, they have an idea, they're in the earlier stages of thinking about, maybe bringing it into the world as a multi-location concept. Where would you advise that they kind of get started?
Every person that you just mentioned, Tessa, believes that they're really good at something or multiple parts of the business. They're either really, really good at sales, and so they're the one that needs to handle every person that comes in the door, or they're very, very good at service. And so they need to be the one that does the accountability conversation and the monthly meeting to show them their results and their coaching conversation, or they're the best at handling the books. And so they have to be the person that's in charge of paying all the bills, or they believe that they're the person that has to do these things. I've been there. My advice to them, Tessa, is you got to be able to understand that anything that you can't put down in a standard operating procedure is going to be your responsibility for the rest of forever unless you find a unicorn. And
Right.
so I think back to my early days, whenever I got into regional positions, I didn't know what I was looking for. I just knew I had energy and I knew I could sell. And so I looked for people that had energy and could sell. I just looked for myself and somebody
Right.
else and went, "You've got energy. Let's go. You've got energy."
Yeah.
But what I later on realized was, okay, these were the characteristics that I was looking for. Here's the what they needed to be successful. Here's the expectations that I could have put on that person or should have put on that person to make sure that they were successful. And then here's how I should have performance managed them. And so looking back, had I simply created that outline, well, how much easier would it be for me to be able to train someone else to do the same thing? And
Right.
so, whatever it is that these studio owners or managers think that they're the best at, put it down on a piece of paper and make sure that there's a process behind it. That way, if someone else had to hire everybody inside of your gym, what would they look for? What questions would they ask? How many interviews would there be? What would the onboarding look like? Just put it all in an SOP.
Right.
Sales. You think you're the best at sales? What does your phone call sound like? What's the script? How many times do you reach out? What do the text messages say? What do the emails say? Put it all in your CRM and make it a process. That way, it doesn't have to be you following up with every single person. That's how you duplicate. That's how you make it successful long term, is by putting those procedures into place. And I will tell you, Tessa, we had to meet, myself and the owners of Traction Group, we met quarterly for
Mm-hmm.
days at a time to be able
Yeah.
to say, okay, here's all the things that we put together last time we met. What's working? What's not? What do we need to expound on? What do we need to add? Let's go, let's go,
Right.
let's go. What are the three things we need to start doing? What are the three things we need to stop doing? Let's go, let's go, let's go. And we would just meet for days at a time to put all this together. And then, okay, ready, team break. Let's go.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Back to it, and then we would disseminate the information and help the managers with the new things that we created or whatever the case. And
Yeah.
so, everything has to be documented. And that was what I think allowed us to be long-term successful. And that's what I advise to all the groups that I've consulted that have scaled is you got to be able to have SOPs for literally everything. I mean, if
Right.
you, whatever you assume that your staff knows, they probably don't know.
They don't.
And so
Yeah.
if you think they're just going to naturally handle a lead properly, well, go
Right.
ahead and secret shop your club real quick and see what happens. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah, there's ways to test it all. Absolutely. And I love that you mentioned those quarterly kind of get-togethers with the management team, because what as you were, talking about documenting everything, what came into my mind was, that owner that says, well, like I don't have the time to do that. And we, it's every like logically we understand, well, you don't have the time because you haven't taken the time to
Exactly.
create the SOPs so that they can be handed off to other people. But what got me, an idea that popped in my head was kind of this idea of like an SOP retreat, which is you have to get away from the day to day. And,
Right.
and then essentially said you all did exactly that, because you can't do it in the day to day. There's too many things pulling at you at all times. Ben, it's been awesome having you. I'd love to kind of wrap up with just, you know, what are you excited about in boutique fitness? Like, what are you, what's top of mind for you? What are you excited about 2025? Maybe, the next 12 to 18 months. I just, love to learn what's getting you, pumped and excited in this space.
A few things, Tessa, I was just reflecting on the Health and Fitness Association conference that we got a chance to chat at, and how many people that I talked to while I was there. I really prioritized in-person meetings and got a chance to ask a ton of questions. And so there's a few things that I'm really excited about. I think first of all, I'm really excited at seeing people leverage technology. I think there's been this disconnect for so many years where people have used CRMs for texting and maybe phone calls if you're pretty strong, and that's kind
Mm-hmm.
of it. And so the fact that technology is becoming the forefront of how we manage our business, I think is so powerful. And using AI to be able to help as an assistant to make sure that we're calling the right people at the right time, saying the right things. Our messaging is clear. We're not letting leads fall through the cracks, because if somebody messages us at 10 p.m. and the manager's not sitting by the phone, they're being responded to by a bot or something's happening. And so I think there's just such a merging of the old school thought process of everything has to be done in person and the new school process of everything's automated. I think it will
Right.
always in fitness be a blend, because we're all people and we need that coaching. We need that personal touch, but we can also leverage technology to help us. And so I'm really excited to see that blend, because I think if it's done well, man, it turns into a superpower.
Yeah.
The second thing that I'm really excited about is seeing the evolution of a lot of different brands coming up in the space.
Mm.
Franchising is so huge nowadays. And so seeing so many different franchise brands become more powerful. The Burn Boot Camp, I think they had their panel at HFA, and that was so cool to see just how fast they've grown. And, F45 rebranding to FIT, functional
Yeah.
inspired training, and some of those things. I think some of the evolution of the franchise brands has been really exciting to see, because of how strong they can be if they lean into the community and their member base. So I'm excited about that. And then lastly, I'm actually a part of a group that's being sponsored through IDEA, Health and Fitness Association, that is developing a mentorship program. And so, Tessa, to your point, we many times in this podcast have talked about the importance of developing staff. Well, I think historically there's been a disconnect in the fact that owners or managers have thought, I have to develop every single one on my team
Mm.
personally by
Right.
myself, my responsibility. If I don't do it, I've failed as a leader. Well, what if there was a group or an organization that was able to partner with you to make that happen? And so I'm a part of the advisory committee, and then also, of course, I'm going to be a mentor within that group. And I'm really excited to see, rising tide raises all ships, right? I think
Absolutely.
if we can make it part of the industry to stop, throwing handbooks at people and saying, go make 50 phone calls, good luck,
Yeah.
right?
Absolutely.
I mean, we joke about it because unfortunately at this point it is the norm. Well, how do
Right.
we change that? And I think mentorship and development of people and partnering to be able to bring up the next generation of fitness professionals the right way, I think is how we do that. And so that would be the third thing that I'm very, very excited about is seeing the industry start to band together to be able to train and develop the next generation, which we saw at HFA. I mean, how many education sessions were there? I mean, it's insane
Yeah.
to see how
Tons.
more we're
Yeah.
leaning into education just as an industry, which I love.
Yeah. 100%. Well, it's been a pleasure to have you, Ben, and we'll definitely include, all those links in the show notes for people to check those things out. And thanks again for coming on. It's been great to have you.
This has been a blast, Tess. Appreciate the conversation.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Multi Studio Mastery. If you're building a studio business you're proud of and these conversations are helping, do us a favor and leave a review, or send this to someone else in the trenches. Every share helps more owners get insight they need to scale the right way. And don't forget, the free Studio Operations Toolkit is always available in the show notes, along with other resources we've mentioned today. Thanks again for listening, and I'll catch you next time.